Hi everyone, Happy New Year and welcome to our very first workshop for InfoSec Girls, InfoSec Diversity. And this year we have lot of workshops planned, so stay tuned for it. And today's workshop is all about AWS Basics. And we have Shreya with us, Shreya Poekar, who's going to walk us through with the AWS Basics as well as what are the things that are needed to get started with cloud security. So I'll just give it to Shreya, and Shreya will take over the screen. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much, Vandana ma'am. So I'll first share my screen. And this is since this is a workshop, I'm not using any slides today. So it will just be I'll be sharing my AWS console screen, and I'll just be like I'll walk you through everything that I do. So yeah, let's get started. So
Perfect. And before we start, we want to thank our platform supporter, Cloudal, for supporting the platform. Thank you so much, Cloudal. Over to you, Shreya.
thank you so much. Okay, so I think we should get started. First, a small introduction of me, maybe, because since I'm not using any slides, so I am Shreya Pohekar, and currently I am working as a developer with TCS. And yeah, alongside all these things, I also do infosec things. And previously I got to learn about AWS and how different services works. So I thought of giving a basic introduction to all the services that are like very popular with AWS. And you should really know about it, because not just for um, learning the security things, but you can even end up building your own things with AWS. So let's get started. I'll just do a AWS login, because so yeah, very first thing that the very app page opened up. So here is a free tier that Amazon offers for various different services. So if you are getting started, the very first thing is obviously that you create an account with AWS Console. So once you are done with that, there are a bunch of um, services that are provided for free for the first year, but there are also services that are free forever. Like they have a certain limit, but they are free forever. So let's go through some of them. Like here it's EC2, which is a VM sort of thing in a nutshell. So they are providing you 750 hours per year. That is more than enough if you run a single instance for 1 year. So that's like 12 months free. Then this Amazon S3 is a storage service which provides you free 5 GB, and that's for 12 months. Then you'll be cost accordingly. Then RDS is a database. Then Dynamodb is a NoSQL database. Then we have got Lambda, which is really very popular. It's a serverless service on which you can simply deploy your code and do various things, like mainly used for API development. We'll cover this one also. And then a lot of, you can see like six and more pagination things are present. So yeah, there are like filters like always free, and you'll see that 25 GBs of DynamoDB is going to be always free. And same for like Lambda, 1 million requests are free, SNS, a lot more things. So the very first thing you should do if you want to like explore more into cloud services, you should really go through this particular page. So it will be like you won't be charged anything, and you'll enjoy your exploration. So that was this particular thing that you should have a look into. So now we'll start with a concept that is present in AWS, which is called as zones and regions. So so zones and regions are basically first the I'll use this whiteboard as well, it will really help. um, so you have got a region in that you have got multiple AZs, which is called availability zones. So it's a region like we see here in the uh, global database that, yeah, there are Virginia, which is called US East 1, then US East 2, US West 1. So this was a region, and these East 1, East 2 are all the availability zones. So so these are because they want to provide you like low latency, high availability. So that's why there is this concept. And yeah, and obviously these zones are like separate from each other, means they can be used as a failover thing, and you can maybe they can be used as something where your data resides redundantly, means if you are using if you are developing something into US West 2, and you feel that your data is very critical, and if for some reason this thing is like damaged for some reason, because there are like natural calamities as well, like earthquakes or what not. So if that particular thing is destroyed, you always have that different place where your data is available, so it provides that kind of features as well. So I'll just open up my console. Okay. All right. So that was a very first basic concept of a availability zone, which is also called as AZ, and regions. So like here, it was also Mumbai was also selected. So you can choose different regions based on if you are building something that you want your users to have lowest latency. So in that case, like for example, if my users are based out of India, so I'll be most probably using Mumbai as my region, because that will offer least latency to my users. So that's how that region things also work. But there is one more thing to it, like all the regions have got different like pricings. So you can just really type in AWS pricing calculator. So yeah, this one is giving for AWS EC2. But yeah, here is, yeah, means you can also create an estimate, like whatever your thought process is for your application or anything, you can do a estimate like what it's gonna cost you. So it is really important to know this particular thing, because sometimes while exploring we do something that can cost us a lot. Like it happened to me as well previously. Like I was given free credits on Azure. It was $100, and I was not really aware of the pricing structure. So I like spawned an instance of like 6 GB RAMs and a lot of storage. Although I had no use, but I was just exploring, and I created an instance with that particular configuration. And like in 3 days, I got a mail that you have consumed 80% of your credits. So I was like, okay. And then I went to the cost explorer thing, and there they were like charging too much uh for all the things. So that made me realize that whenever you are using any services, you should be very much aware of their pricings and how they work, and what should be the configuration in which you'll be cost like more or less. So that's what a solution architect do while he develops a solution. Like it can be anything, right? So whatever you're using first, there should be an estimate of what you will be like costing yourself. So that was one thing. Then we'll be going to another concept in AWS, which is high availability and scalability. So there are so in scalability there are two things in which we can scale. First is called vertical stability, scalability, and another is called horizontal scalability. So vertical scalability means increasing the size of instance. So I'll take for example EC2 here, where, all right, yeah, so this is one of my instances right now in the stopped state. So right now this particular instance is created with uh, T2 micro. Okay, so I'll maybe launch another instance and select this one. AMI, this one is free tier eligible as it's written. So if you are exploring, you should really select these two. Then I'll Okay, so here is a list of configurations that you can use. Like here it's written for T2 micro, it's free tier eligible. So you should really choose that. But if you are not much into this free tier thing, then there are a lot of options to use. Like they are giving 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 GBs of RAM as well. So based on your use case, you can like select any one of those, and even you can change from T2 micro to maybe T2 2x large later on. So that is something called as vertical scalability, because you are increasing the configuration of your machine. So that is vertical. And when it's horizontal scalability, it's like you are using maybe 2 or 5 or 10 or maybe 50 T2 micro instances. So you are horizontally scaling. Okay, right, there are now there is not just one instance, now there are multiple instances. So that is called horizontal scalability. So getting back to, like, we now launch the instance as well. So the first thing was that selecting the AMI. So yeah, I'll go back to the screen again. So there are a lot of AMIs available. So you can think of just like a operating system available for your instance. So recently the support for Mac as well was added. We have got RHEL, we've got SUSE, Ubuntu, like all sorts of uh, Linux things. And we have also got the Windows as well, Windows Server, and like whatever is used in industry standards, exactly that you can choose based on your requirement thing. There are also like specific things to, like they are mentioning here, deep learning means it's configured, all the packages are there that are used for doing deep learning stuff. So yeah, there are a bunch of them. So, okay, so I selected here T2 micro. Then this one is an important page, and a lot of configurations are also mentioned here. So, first one is this launch into auto scaling group. So, just now, like I said, that you can do horizontal scaling as well. So, in horizontal scaling, there are more than one number of instances. So there I have right now, or by default it's one, because it's just one instance that we're running. But if you want that, like at most or at least two instances should be running, so in that case I'll not be writing a one, it would be two or three, and then I can also configure it into auto scaling groups. Means there are multiple conditions on which you can do whole of the configuration of instances. Like for example, I have a website and it gets a lot of traffic, and I am on a single instance right now. But when a lot of traffic comes in that time, it obviously becomes slow, because a lot of simultaneous requests are being handled by the server. So this, in this particular scenario, this auto scaling group comes in. So what it does is, we can specify a condition here, like if my RAM consumption becomes maybe 50% or 75%, you have to launch one more instance, so that uh, the load that was on a single or maybe two servers, it can be like balanced over all the three or all the five or whatever the number is. So that's how this scaling group works. Then there is a purchasing option which says request spot instances. So if I don't check that mark, what will happen is a regular VM will be launched, and if a check mark has been done, a spot instance is launched. So difference is the pricings for spot instances are very very low when compared to the like normal instances, because these kind of instances are being like launched for uh like when you want to do a specific calculation, specific um like function in a very short time, and you are like, you know that you will be terminating that instance once your work is done. So for that purpose you can really use this check mark, and that will that's gonna cost you very very less. You can check out that. I think I opened up here as well. Okay, so yeah, you can check that out and you'll see that there is a huge difference between the cost of this two. So there is one more thing with the spot instance. It's um, like you have to define a price for which your instance will be running. So for example, if I'm choosing T2 micro, it will say that your price should not exceed $0.08. Okay, so you have to define that point zero 0.08, and once it reaches like exceeds the 0.08, your instance will be automatically terminating, because you were requesting a spot and there you can see it like that. So once your budget, which was 0.08, it exceeds, it will automatically terminate. So that's one thing with spot instance, and that never happens with your normal instance that you launched. So then there are VPCs as well that you can configure. Then subnets. Also, you can assign a public IP. So public IP. Here's a concept again. If I can duplicate this one. So we have got just a second. Hmm. So here we have got elastic IPs. So this is something that you use as a public IP address that you can attach to this EC2 instance that we'll be creating. So what happens is, if you are like continuously starting and stopping your instance, every time you do it, the IP address will be changed. The public IP address will be changed. But if you want that what like however means any number of time it starts or stops, your IP address should be same, because there may be many use cases to why you want that. So in that case you need to create an elastic IP address, and that IP address will allocate an IP address for you, IPv4. And then once it's created, like I'll not create, but I'll maybe go through this particular thing. So yeah, Amazon's pool of IPv4 addresses means whatever will be available, it will be allocated to you. And once it gets allocated, it will be listed down here, and you will see a public IP address. Yeah. So once you get that IP address and you attach to maybe this instance, so your instance will always be accessible by that particular IPv4 address, and even if it's restarted, it will be same. That is what it is. Then we've got IAM role as well, which you can attach to this particular instance, like what kind of uh, things you want a person with that role to do on this particular instance. So that is like restrictions that you are enabling for your EC2s. Then 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 these options are all default at times. So, and this last one is really important if in some cases, maybe like if you want to directly like launch an instance, but it should have something um something like built pre-built, sort of like if I am wanting that my instance that launches, it should have Apache 2 installed like already, so my application just directly starts running and I don't want anything to configure it. Okay, so for that, uh, like in that particular situation, you can maybe type here everything, like I'll do a apt get update app install Apache 2 and all those permissions that we give in order to run an Apache application. So that all can be, it's called user data, and it can be also as a file. You can directly write here as a text, and it will just while like launching the instance, all of these things will be executed, and yeah, your instance will be ready. Then you have got storage. So storage are also of three types in here. I'll be covering that. So right now it's a EBS storage. We have also got EFS storages. We have also got instance store. So I'll cover both three of these things. Actually, just a second. Mm. So instance store is used when so it happens that your root volume is gonna go, like whatever you did in your root volume, it's gonna go if you reboot your instance. So in order to persist that, you are basically using these disks. So EBS volume, elastic block storage, is a network device. Instance store is a physically attached device, so it gives you less latency, very less latency. So obviously in EBS you get some latency, but still it's like uh, you won't realize that particular difference. But yeah, there is a difference. So, an EFS is elastic file storage. You can consider is very similar to NFS. Like if you are creating a EFS, then that particular drive may be mounted on more than one instances. But if you're creating a EBS, then it will be just mounted in one instance at a time. And instance store are, yeah, it's like one for a one instance thing. So that's what is the storage part. And there are multiple types as well, like this IO and GP2 GP3 that you see are like types that are allowing you input output operations. So they've got bursts and all that. So they are basically saying that how fast things will work when you do a read write transaction. So GP2 GP3 and all this have got various different configurations. So based on your requirement you can choose like what to go with. So GP2 is the like basic one, and more basic is this magnetic standard, because these are SSDs and this won't be a SSD. So, and yeah, one more option is available, encryption. So you can also do a disk encryption if you don't want your data at rest to be like uh, readily available. So if you want to do a encryption, you can do that via KMS, that is uh, managed key service, managed encryption service by AWS, and it's the KMS service is present all over the AWS. So that encryption you'll see a lot where the keys and all are managed by AWS. Then next is add tags. So tags is basically you are identifying your instance with a name, or there can be a lot of things. So generally we use that name thing and the value thing, my first instance, so that you can easily identify your instance anywhere. So because um, all the resources that we create in AWS that have got a ID, but ID is obviously hard to like remember. So obviously we need to give this tag thing so that we are easily able to identify our resources. Then next is this very important configuration setup, which is security group. So security group can also be considered very similar to a firewall, which is gonna block your request if the entry is not particularly present here. So right now it's enabling SSH by default. If you want, you can remove it. And here it says that any IP is allowed. So add selected custom, and it's gonna give you like suggestion for various CIDRs, and yeah, that will work. Because obviously if you are creating EC2, you might want to SSH into it. So that's why this was present by default. And yeah, you can add multiple rules as well. So you want maybe all TCP traffic or UDP traffic or ICMP, means if you want that functionality of ping, then you can enable this in the um, this is called inbound rules. So like the incoming traffic, so you can enable this and your ping will start to work. Then you've got a lot of DNS, SMTP, like all of them. And then there is a option for all traffic as well. So that's not a recommended thing. That's why like whatever services that you are explicitly using should only be mentioned here. So I'll delete this and I'll do a review and launch. So it's just giving a like gist of what we did just now, and then you can simply do a launch. And I already had an um, that's a key pair file that we are going to use for SSH. So I'm having already this, so I can choose that, but you can also create a new one. Okay, and then we launch instance. Okay. Yeah, and right now it's in the pending state, T2 micro, status checks, and availability zone is US East 2A. So let it run first, then I can move further. So the volumes that I was talking about, so those volumes can be encrypted. As you can see, there was an option for encryption, but like initially you might have chosen the non encryption method, and now that you want to encrypt that particular volume, so that thing is also possible, and that is possible via snapshots. So the snapshots are very good actually. You can create a snapshot of your volume that you created. So there are two volumes that are created. Like first, this is the one that I just created the EC2 instance of. And like right now I did nothing here, but you have that option to encrypt. Like right now it's not encrypted, so once I create the snapshot, it will give me an option that do you want to encrypt this. Means once I create this, then I have to create a copy, and when I create a copy, in that time they'll ask if you want it to be encrypted or not, and in that time you can select that yes, I want encryption, and you'll be done. So that's how the snapshot thing works. So okay, the instance is now running, and I'll open the summary as well for it. So yeah, got an instance ID and your tag is now here. Then we've got public IPv4 address, which will be the address by which you can access the instance. We've got this DNS as well. Then private IP address. If you are working in a VPC, this address will be very useful. Then the instance type. Then we have got Yeah. So security thing is the security groups that we just configured. So it's both for inbound and outbound request. So outbound is basically all true, but we need to configure the inbound things. So yeah, then that is all good. Then storage monitoring. Monitoring is when you define it, you will be getting all the details of what's been happening. But yeah, it gives all the graph, a very good graph of what is going on with your instance. And yeah, storage. Storage is a newly created volume, and it's also given an ID, and the volume size was 8 GB. And yeah, that's how that look like. And now maybe I'll take this thing here. Okay, I hope that is visible. Okay, so I right now created an instance, and it has got this particular address. So I'll copy this. Oh, maybe I can do this, and I'll do an SSH into it. So SSH and pasting this IP address, and it's asking for that authorization. So this, yeah, and I am into this particular instance that I just created. And EC2 user is the default user uh, when we are using Linux, the Amazon AMI. If you are using Ubuntu, your default user will be Ubuntu. So like that it works. Then simply doing an LSFNLA. Okay, we see like the basic default things. Who am I? It will say EC2 user. So let's just configure a web application, which will just simply print hello world apt install. Okay, so first is apt get update. So it needs to be otherwise. Okay. Oh, that is really weird. It's not got the apt command only. So so that whole thing I'll have to do in another instance where maybe yam or that thing works. So let it be for now then. Um all right. So yeah, no worries. We'll maybe move ahead. So just a second. Okay. We next go to RDS. I was creating this for. So RDS, as I already said, that it's used for, it's very much similar to what you use as Amis SQL or Postgres SQL. So it's a structured database which has got all the schemas defined. So here we see in the database, so nothing is right now present, but we can surely create one database. I'm not going to create because it takes too much time to create, but yeah, I can show all the options present down there. So the very first is the Amazon Aurora. So it's a proprietary database that is created by Amazon, and it offers very high speed when compared to MS SQL and MySQL and Postgres SQL. So it's like 10 or 5% increased speed when compared to these two particular databases. So yeah, means yeah, you can choose that, but yeah, again, it's got higher prices compared to these two. So based on your use case, you can select any of these given. Then obviously production, dev test, and free tier is also available. Right now I'll be choosing this. You set a master password for your user that you're creating, and then you can simply type in the password and then the DB instance that you'll be using. So this is a managed service, means you need not do any infrastructure provisioning for this. You need not do any patches for this, because Amazon is gonna like do it for you. So it's a managed service. So EC2 was not a managed service, because if you maybe you install MySQL, maybe you can do that, right, with apt. So you will have to manage all the provisioning. You are managing the service that you're installing, and you will have to manage its like versioning thing as well. No one is going to do that for you. But if you are explicitly using a managed service, everything Amazon is going to do. So that is one of the managed service. So here again we have got this IO1 and GP2 options. So yeah, that you can select based on your use case, and allocated space is 20 GBs, and that's the minimum as well, and maximum is 16,000 or so GBs. And yeah, again, if you wanted to be a part of your created VPC, you can anytime select that. You can create a new VPC from here. Then AZ, if you want, like right now I'm in the this region. This four are the AZs. So if you want any preference, you can simply do that. Then there are three authentication mechanisms available here. Password and Kerberos would be very nice thing to go with, but if you just want password, like we do in MySQL -u root -p thing, so that is what is called password authentication. So yeah, again, based on the use case, you can go with, yeah, but the Kerberos thing is obviously more handy and more secure. Then that was RDS, and similar is not similar, but one of the other services that is also managed one. It's DynamoDB. So with DynamoDB, you are allowed to create no SQL databases. Means you are not required to define a schema. Means your data can be in any form, structured, semi-structured, or totally unstructured. So I'll go to tables, and I already have one table in here, and it has got this index, monitor, global tables. So global tables are, it says replicas. So the concept of replica is when you are doing something into production maybe, and your write database, means the database to which you write the information, is having a lot of load because a lot of requests are coming in. So if you are using the same database to read those transactions, the server will be heavily loaded. So, in order to take off the load from the main table, the master table, you can create replicas. So, what happens is, just a sec. Okay, yeah. So, you have got this master DB, and you can create read replicas for this. So your master DB is getting all the writes thing, means someone is writing into that database, and then these are asynchronously being copied into these two read replicas. Okay, these two are read replicas, and yeah, obviously you can read from this also, but these are specifically designed to do just the read. You will not be able to write into these two replicas. So that's what the purpose is. These are basically taking off the load from the main database, allowing for better user experience. Okay, so That was replicas. You can obviously create backups for your data. Then, all right. So, what other things do we have in here? So, see, here is a partition key that was defined as f name. So, everything will be based out of this particular string. Okay, the primary key. Okay. Uh, Okay, get live item count. So currently the database is having 5 entries, total size. And what does this say? Okay, you can also get a live item count as well if you are somewhere in the production and maybe you want to just monitor. Maybe you can use that. All right. So that was okay. We can also have a look here. Update table class. You can delete a table, you can create item index, create replica directly from here. You can export the data to s3. All right, you can manage tags and access control policy, something like you are defining who have the access to what things. So that are some of the menu options. Explore table options. Let's see what's here. So yeah, you can see that the database name is this. Then we have got these particular entries over here. So this right now looks like a structured data because it's name, address, age, last name. But yeah, obviously you can use it for like it can be majorly used for data analytics where the data is too much unstructured. Okay. So um so since we were right now talking of the DynamoDB, I want to take next the Lambda. So I created a basic application for this. So I'm using right now. So the function name is HTTP CRUD that I'm doing, and the whole code is written with Node.js. So what's happening here is um, so I have created, I'm basically using this particular um, database that we just saw for the DynamoDB, and we are simply performing a lot of actions on this database. So that is basically, I have configured an API right there. Okay, so you can do a search, you can do a like when you go to home you'll basically getting all the items, and in search you'll be maybe putting like posting some string that was f name, and you'll be getting all the entries that were corresponding to f name. So right now it takes the table name and it yeah, the thing that is taking is f name, means you need to provide f name, and then it will give you the result having all the things which matches the f name or last name. So your search string will be matched on both the f name and last name, the first and the last name column, and it will return you. Okay, then put items is basically you are putting things into your database. So you have to like pass in all the things via JSON request, and here they are, the format looks this, and then you are simply calling this, and it will be into your database. So that's a very simple API. And now you can like see here event.route key, and there are three cases that I made, and everyone having an endpoint and a it's a request header which is get, post, and put. So to access a lambda using an like while you create an API and you want to access lambda somehow, right? So you do that via API gateway. So we'll go next to API gateway. All right. And here one of the API gateways are created. So, all right. So for this particular API, there are these things attached. So these were created using create, and in this you specify any method and you do an endpoint thing. So right now we have this three things, and it has like they are all linked, and it has got the lambda attached to it. So when we go to integrations, we'll see that for the get home, a AWS Lambda function has been attached, and the name is CRUD tutorial function. Then for put, there is a lambda attached and it's called this, because obviously there was just one lambda function doing all the three things, but you are free to create different lambda functions for different purpose. And that's what's like used industrially. And yeah, that should be followed because that makes the lambda function way more easier to understand. So right now this is um, all integrated to a lambda function. All right. So that that comes under this integration tag. And then there are stages. So right now the default one is, yeah, it's created by default, and then there is prod. So you can also create more if you want, because in production there are a lot of stages present, like dev, QA, testing, and all that. So when these were created, these were having automatic deployment enabled. So this is an important thing to note, because when automatic deployment is not enabled, you need to manually click this deploy button for whatever changes you do, okay, in any of these sections. So if automatic deployment is allowed, yeah, and it's enabled, then you just do your changes and it will be automatically done. Then we have a very important thing got here, which is course. So a lot of times, obviously, when you are creating API, you want some domain to access this particular API. So if you are not particular like doing this configuration, you won't be able to call your API in the HTML or whatever front end code you are writing. That is because of this cross origin resource sharing. So what happens here is, um, so the by default setting is like this API won't be accessible by anyone. So the by default behavior is the deny. So if you want to allow a few things, you'll have to configure all this stuff. And right now, see, I've written here that access control allow origin is asterisk. That means any domain is allowed to access this API. But I'm just talking of the like exploration scenario here, like we are just getting to know the things, but the actually this configuration is highly vulnerable to course attacks, right? So what happens here is, if a wild card is entered here, so any domain will have the access to this particular API. And when it happens, and there is this important, very important header present here which says allow credentials, and right now it's no, which is good. But if it's yes, it means that, like if we are using a combination of wildcard and yes, it means that if for example a user is logged to the application A, okay, and some malicious user sends him a link on which the user A clicks, and he gets all of his information, personal information, maybe his profile information. So why that happened? Because the API that was called during that time, it tried to access that particular lambda. So that lambda, for example, you can say maybe home. Home was that route that the malicious link tried to access, and whatever was the response, because of this allow credential true, it was available for that particular malicious link. Okay, because you have said that allow control, access control allow region is a wildcard, means anyone can access your API. So that made your app very much vulnerable. So it's a very, so it was just a configuration thing here, but still it can go wrong, and yeah, then you are vulnerable to course. So that's one thing to take care of, and never ever use a wildcard in here. So yeah, that was API gateway. So since I've created this particular thing, I'll simply show a quick demo of how we can use curl in order to use our API. So one of the major tools or very popular tools that we use for API testing is Postman. But if you are more of a CLI person, or you just want to do some quick checks, you can use curl obviously anytime. So see here, I did a post request. It's a post request to search endpoint, and this was the whole URL of my API gateway. And the data section is f name, the value is test, and the content type is application JSON, means the data that I provided was in JSON. So that's the breakdown of all the things that are written here. And then it returned two results, where address, then last name. First name is test, and in second, the last name is test. So you can see. So as I showed that it's written in the API that you have to do a search on maybe L name or F name. So yeah, that's why it returned two results. And that's how you can work with testing of your APIs using API gateway, lambdas, and Dynamodb. So that was one section. Then we'll come to S3. Okay. All right. So S3, as you know, is one of the very popular service of AWS, and it can be used to maybe store files or maybe host a static website even. So yeah, means if you have got a maybe a blog kind of thing, you just have some HTML files that you just want to host. So S3 is a very nice option, as we saw earlier that 5 GB is free for lifetime. So that's like one thing very in favor, like. So we can get started first by creating a bucket. So maybe I'll do it with bucket 123. It asks for the region, and yeah, it's US East 2. It's my current region, right? Oh, it's global. Because the configuration for a bucket becomes global. Once you are here, it becomes global. And that's why it's asking you to select a preference. Uh, then we have got ACL disabled and ACL enabled things. So there are two things, means all object in this bucket are owned by this account, and object in this bucket can be owned by other accounts. So if you want that kind of functionality, so you can obviously do that. Otherwise, this one, as they say, is the recommended. And that's the best part about AWS actually. Like, they have mentioned the gist of what they are trying to say, and there is an option for learn more where you can directly go, and there will be an AWS documentation present in there. So yeah, a lot of things in here. So it's just S3 specific, and you see a lot of things. So You should really go through these documentations because they are really good. And yeah, getting back to it, I'll make this vulnerable. Block all public access is obviously it's not accessible to public. Then there are multiple options present in here. Block public access to buckets and object granted through new access control list, then through any access control list. So this is again based on use case, and they have provided a small gist of what the checkbox is gonna do. So I am making it completely vulnerable. So now AWS has started giving this warning sign, and you have to acknowledge this, that you are doing something or your configurations are vulnerable, and that might be harmful in the future. So yes, I do acknowledge. And then there is an option to do a bucket versioning. So what is this is, you can maintain different versions for your object. So, for example, if the file name is test and I uploaded it to the bucket, and and this particular configuration is disabled. So, in that case, um, if I were to upload the test file again, the previous file will be replaced. So that's how that works. But if you turn on the bucket versioning, in that case, when you upload a new file, like a modified file with the same name test, so it will be versioned, like that will be your latest version, and the previous file will be a lower version, and both will be maintained, and these will be maintained for like all the objects that you do. So these things are not getting deleted because now they are getting versioned. So that's how that versioning thing works. But yeah, there is one thing here: if you enable the versioning, you cannot disable it later for a bucket. So again, there is an option for tags. If you want, you can add default encryption. So if you want your things to be encrypted, you can go with these. So this is this SSES3. So an encryption key that Amazon S3 creates, manages, and uses for you. So it's very understandable by the small gist that they have provided. So there is one more option that is not present, so maybe deprecated, I think. So that option was when you are managing your keys. So in that case, you are basically sending the encrypted object to the AWS server. But for these two things, the encryption keys are managed by AWS only, and when you send the object, it's not in the encrypted state, but it gets encrypted on the server. So that's how that works. And then advanced setting object locks. Store object using a read once, write many model to help you prevent objects from being deleted or overwritten for a fixed amount of time. So yeah, that's one of the object, like one of the configurations that you can do. But I'll skip for now. Okay, so that creates my vulnerable bucket. So yeah, objects can be public. So when I go here, um, yeah, there's nothing here, but we'll have a look through these sections as well. So again, it's asking for you to edit your versioning and encryption and intelligent tier archive configuration. I'll talk this in a bit. Then server access login CrowdTrail can be connected to S3. So you can basically, and CloudWatch even. So with CloudWatch, you'll be able to log everything out. And the CloudWatch logs are stored in S3. So that's how these S3 and CloudWatch are interconnected. And Yeah, means because a lot of services that we use in AWS, everyone is generating a lot of logs, and that's very important uh, because anything can go wrong at any time. So in that time, the logs will really help you at the very granular level in order to identify what went wrong. So CloudWatch is a like very important service of AWS. Okay, then the permissions. So yeah, we see here. But yeah, you have again got an option to write bucket policy. So bucket policy is something where you are basically allowing or denying something. So here I've got this policy generator as well. So there are a few options. So this particular site can help you generate SQSQ policy, S3, VPC, IAM, SNS. So principle is like for whom you are allowing or disallowing. So first is the effect, like you are allowing or denying. So then here comes S3, then the actions. Because if you are choosing um, like S3, then there are a lot of options you can do with an S3 bucket. You can update job status, you can create access points, you can create bucket, you can create jobs for S3, and a whole lot of things, right? So these are basically the granular things, okay? Because you are explicitly allowing only these three things, means the person or the bucket with this policy will just allow these three things. So it can be, okay, maybe I'll select 2, 3, and yeah, the ARN will be of this particular bucket, which we can see in the object section. No, the property section. Yeah, that's the ARN. Uh, okay, I'll create one maybe. Yeah, and it created. So this was the table thing, the generate policy that will create the JSON for you, and you need to simply paste this JSON in here where the thing gone permission and the bucket policy, and it will act according to what permissions you have given. And also there is course for this thing as well, because a lot of websites may be using um, objects that are stored in S3 buckets, like if for example application stores all the static files and the images in S3. So again, a thing will be here, because you won't be able to access these things unless you define course, means you are basically allowing your application to access this S3 and its objects. So again, same thing for this. You'll have to define access control, allow origin, credentials might not be really required here, but all the other headers need to be defined. That's what's called course of S3. Then matrices. Yeah, so as your bucket size will grow, this data is gonna populate. And yeah, management. So yeah, again, this one is a important configuration, I would say. So just a second. So I'll S3 and okay. Okay, so this configuration is for the type of objects that you have in your S3 bucket. So there are five five, what you'd say, configurations for this. So first is the standard IA, then we've got intelligent tiering, then one zone IA, then glacier and the deep archive. So these all things have got different use cases. So for example, um, your application on EC2 creates image thumbnails after profile pictures are uploaded to Amazon S3. And these thumbnails can be easily created and need to be kept only for 45 days, for example. And the source image should be able to immediately be retrieved. And yeah, after 45 days, you are like allowed that the user can wait up to 6 hours or so. So there are a lot of these kind of requirements, and there may be something like you are maybe backing up your data into S3. It can be any kind of file, right? And you are just using S3 for backups, and you don't want immediate access. Like once I click that object, it should it I'll bear that it takes some time to open. So for that kind of thing, for that kind of use cases, we can create a life cycle rule as well. So for example, I took that first scenario where after 45 days, the latency is not so much important to me. So I'll create a transition rule in which the standard configuration that are told, so it move them to glacier. So the glacier configuration is when the object will take some time to like get, okay, when you're getting that object, it will take some time. So obviously, since it's glacier and the deep archive that are talked, so it will, why they are important, because that's gonna cost you very less. And if you go with that standard configuration, which is the by default configuration when you create a bucket and store objects, so it's gonna be like slightly more costly. So just in order to reduce the cost, they have come up with a lot of like configurations where you are able to do a transition. So after 45 days, your object will move from standard to glacier, and yeah, then after 45 days it would be reduced cost. So that way it works. And you can create the life cycle, yeah, permanently delete non-current version of objects, expire current version of objects. So there are multiple rule actions as well. And see, they have listed here Amazon S3 pricings, which you can have a look at, like how it's gonna work. Like first 50 TBs per month is this 0.023 per GB. So yeah, it really varies when you go from standard to deep archive. And yeah, that's why these all things. So there are also this infrequent access and one zone and standard. So for long lived but infrequently accessed data that needs millisecond access. So everything has got a gist which is very much explanatory. And yeah, the pricing, so you can choose between your use case and work accordingly. So yeah, that was life cycles. Then replica is again same thing, replication of your objects. You can have a look here, although I've never worked with this replication rule, so I'll have a look. Like, requires versioning to be enabled for the source. Enable object versioning on this bucket to continue creating. So it first requires you versioning to be on. Then yeah, you define a rule name, then limit the scope, apply all objects in this bucket. Okay. If you want to do is for all the objects, or you are using some filters. So if you're using filter, then write a filter prefix. They are saying means they um, might be related to bucket name. Yeah. So okay, don't include bucket name in the prefix. Yeah, there are some of the things that they want us to be aware of. And yeah, I am role, then addition, replication object. So destination storage class. Change the storage class. So again, you are given the options like where you want to replicate your data. Is it, are you doing it for all the objects or just specific objects? So you define a prefix there. And yeah, so I like never came to this section, but yeah, this thing is so much explanatory that you can really understand how the things are going. Then yeah, that was okay. Okay, so right now we don't have any object in here. So I'm gonna show the CLI part of it as well. AWS S3 and LS is the command that we use to list the objects in the bucket. So right now there are no objects, so it will be just blank. If you do a AWS S3 copy CP, which is, and dump.sql is a file present in here, and we have to give the path of where the object would be present. You can even give here a directory, so a directory will be created, but I'm gonna just let it be. And this dump.sql is gonna go into that particular thing. So here we see upload was completed to the bucket, and when we see in there, we'll do a refresh. So the dump.sql is present. Um, so since my AWS CLI that I used just now, this is the AWS CLI tool, and it can be used for any services around the AWS console. You can do everything via command line. I was using it for this S3 because I wanted to show how AWS CLI works. So you can all time do this thing hyphen help, and it, okay, it's hyphen h maybe. Oh, it will be hyphen h down there. Oh, it's just help. Oh my god. So AWS help would give a lot of things. I guess I should stop it. It would be better if I do this. So yeah, it is a lot of things, and you can do a lot of things with CLI, like almost everything with CLI, right? So there are AWS LS that we just used, AWS CP that we used, then AWS RM remove, syncing. I am not sure, but I'll have to do some again. Uh, this help thing, and it will tell me that what it does. So yeah, you should always use help commands in order to get more insights of what a command can do. And yeah, so I copied a file. So now I'll use AWS S3 LS and the bucket name. Also, in the bucket names, no underscores or any special characters are allowed. It's just alphanumeric and hyphens, those are allowed. And yeah, you can see that dump.sql is present in the bucket. Okay, so since my AWS has been configured with the secret key and access key ID, which is having full permissions over the account, so I'm able to do anything I want to do. So, like in the real world testing, we come across a lot of S3 buckets, and when we try to do or perform this command, we get um, like access denied thing, right? Because the role the role with which you are trying to do a copy, it's not allowed. And right now it's allowed, so it's allowing me to do that upload. So there are a lot of buckets that might have this kind of misconfiguration. There might be also a misconfiguration where people are able to do a ls all over the objects. So like I did that publicly accessible object, so if I'll do a ls, I'll be able to see what are the things present in that bucket. And also if any other account, so I have the permission on that account, so it's like obvious. But if someone who is not having access to the account, and he is also able to do that AWS S3 LS. So that's how you will be able to list down what all was present in the bucket and maybe exploit something, because uh, there may be use cases where some sensitive information is present in the bucket, and you can leverage or like chain it with other attacks in order to increase the impact. Because I have seen a lot of S3 buckets where this ls thing is enabled. So these buckets are more of like, if you want to download any package, if you want to download any zip, so I go through that uh, S3 bucket, and these are like all the downloadable stuff that was already available to the public. So reporting or addressing that kind of situations, they are just not having any impact. Because like for example, if you're able to do a cp, then it is a different thing. But unless for the ls just you're listing the objects and everything was already like accessible, then it's of really no use. So yeah, that's how like I showed like how misconfigurations can be done in aws s3. Then okay, okay, so lambda I've covered. Now now I wanted to cover a theoretical thing. I won't do a hands-on for that because yeah, it might cost something, or yeah, it would. Okay, first 1 TB of data transfer free each month. Oh, that's great. I didn't knew about CloudFront being free. All right. But yeah, let's go through the options. So first, the very definition of what CloudFront was. So you can consider it, not consider, it is a CDN, which is called Content Delivery Network. So, in order to improve the read performance, you can cache your content at the edge. So, what does that mean? So, let's maybe draw it here. So, consider this is your bucket. Maybe I'll make it some round, and your users are here, here, and you just consider a world map maybe, and your bucket is in Australia, and one of your user is here, one of the user is here. So the distance that the data has to travel for this user and this user is, it's like varying so much. And it's just a line, but globally if you think, it's going to be really big. So what happens is there are edge locations, means you can, and these are owned and managed by aws. So these are all the edge locations, and what happens is the data is cached like once, like we know the concept of hit and miss, right? So the first time if the data is not present here, obviously it's gonna fetch from this bucket or the server, whatever it is, and it's gonna cache into these locations. and next time when same data is being requested, it will request from this or maybe this, okay, whichever is nearest. So there are again a lot of configurations around from where to fetch. So for this user, obviously it was a short and it became slight more short. But for this user, when the data is first retrieved, obviously it will be done from here and it will take some time. But the next time for that same information, the data was already cached here and it will be served from this. So the distance was like drastically reduced, and that's how like people are, the companies, organizations are improving um the performance, right? Because it did not have to go to this and travel long to get all the data. So that's what is a CDN and how that works. So the CDN also allows for DDoS protection because you cannot directly like bombard requests in there. Then then you can expose external HTTPS and talk to internal HTTPS backends. So that's what are some features of a CDN. Then yeah, so that was the thing. Then there are some geo restriction as well, like who can access your content. So, for example, there are three users, for example, now. So, uh, you don't want this user to access your data. So, that can also be done via CloudFront. So, so there are also options of whitelist, like allow your access uh, to content only if they are in one of the countries which are in your approved list. Or you can do a blacklist thing, like prevent users from accessing content if they are in your listed, blacklisted countries. So that's how that list works. And yeah, so why would someone be doing that? So the reasons are there may be some copyright laws that from this particular country we do not want the access. So yeah, the use cases can be like any, but yeah, that's one of the features. Then yeah, obviously it's used for streaming. All right. So next, I think we are done with a lot of services, and it would be really great for someone to start because the most used services are EC2, RDS, DynamoDB. Elasticache is one of the very nice service. Then it's also used as a caching service. Then you have got IAM that will list down all the roles, policies, permissions for which user is having access to which all service, what a user can do when he is on the console, when he is on the CLI, and we have got that access key and secret key thing. I'm not gonna open that section uh, because it's my own account only. So yeah, but yeah, the thing is basically you are defining policies there. It can be in the form of JSON, like we did for the bucket policy. So here it's for the whole AWS thing. Then uh, then one thing maybe. Hmm. Yeah, that billing dashboard you should be really aware of, like how much your services are costing you. It will really help you identify things like if something is going wrong, you'll identify why it's going wrong, and then you'll be jumping into the billing section of different service, and you'll identify that okay, you provisioned something of high configuration and it happened. So also, there are container service and Kubernetes present with AWS. So just like we have VMs, you can launch containers, and yeah, you can define clusters. um, Kubernetes, plastic Kubernetes service. So it's a container orchestration service. You can manage containers, you can scale them up, scale them down, do a lot of container communication, and lot more things with EKS. You can go through the documentation. It's whole of a. I gave previously one of these session on Kubernetes with InfoSec Girls. You should really check that out. Although it was not on AWS, but it was on GCP actually. So yeah, if someone is interested, you should really check out that video. It was also a basic one, so I've covered all the terminologies of Kubernetes in there. So that's something to look at. Then what else I can cover? Yeah, this one small thing I missed out. SQS and SNS, simple queue service, and SNS is the notification service. So, um, all right. So these are basically, as you see, that it's a queue thing, and you are just simply pushing some messages into a queue, and then something is happening out of it. So you can, it's just as simple as that. So with SQS, you are basically producing messages, and and the message is persisted until a customer deletes it. And yeah, the message retention period is also up to 14 days. So and default is 4 days. So there is a so we are simply pushing in messages, and then when we poll those messages, you are able to see like what all messages are in the list, and then you act upon it. Like it again depends on the, what I'll say, the use case of why you are using the SNS service. Uh, okay, all right. So I think that is a thing that you should really explore. And then there is this SNS thing as well, uh, through which you can maybe uh, message yourself something yourself, because I'll maybe, okay, my brokers. Okay, so it's also a message delivery system. And take for example here, like if you want to alert yourself when someone puts an object into S3 bucket, and you want that via email, so you can do it via SNS. So it will, so it's basically a trigger here, which is the use case. And there can be many use cases, like according to your what you are building, or uh, yeah, like how you are building. There are like SQS also, so SQS, and choosing between the SQS and SNS, that is all again a point of discussion. So yeah, it's basically, it's gonna alert you with something. So that's how that works. All right. So I think I've covered a lot of services. If someone is really looking into like getting started, and I've covered a lot of screens, which will enable you to identify what happens when, and it happens from where. So yeah, I guess that's all for this workshop, and I hope you might have learned something new. And yeah, thank you so much.